Hello, good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so today we'll start Django REST framework. Anybody knows about Django REST framework? Okay, Alkesh. Okay, what it is?
Sir, it's a framework or a framework which we are basically using to create RESTful APIs because
Right.
traditionally it takes a lot of efforts to make it in Django. But if we use the DRF, there is a particular syntax that helps us to build it very quickly.
Okay, right. So the Django REST framework actually helpful to build a RESTful APIs in Django. Okay, so Django REST framework is a framework within a framework. Django is already a framework. Then we have Django REST framework. So it is a framework of framework. Okay, so sorry. Okay, yeah. So what is an API? Can anybody tell me what is an API?
So API is basically a system where we can send a request and get the response. It is a system where we can store our data and it gets fetched, or we can read and write our data using the API.
Okay, right. So basically API is an application program interface. As its name suggests, it's an interface between our server and the external server. For example, if you are using a React app or Angular app, anything apart from the Django. So how you can connect your backend with your front end? Is there any way for the March April batch? Guys, if you know, we have built a project, and if so, we have to develop the same project in React. How can we connect the React with our Django or the backend system? So in that case, APIs are built to connect your backend with your front end. For example, let's consider you have a system. Let's consider it's a Reddit system, and you have a front end which is building your React application. Sorry, in React Java framework, JavaScript framework. So let's have a React front end or anything else. It doesn't matter. You have to use front end React. You can use it for the mobile application. You can use it for the plain JavaScript. Otherwise, you can use it for the Flutter, iOS, anything which has a backend connectivity with your web server. So consider you have a Reddit system which is stored on your server. So let's connect our server. Okay, then it's in Django. So let's make it Django Reddit and call it as a backend. Then we have our React app, which is also a Reddit front end. Okay, so how can we connect these two systems? Because these two systems are independently working on their own server. For example, we host our Django application on the dedicated environment. We host our React or whatever we are using for the front end. Let's consider we are using the React application, React framework. So if we are using the React as a framework front end, then we need to have some place or something intermediate between our web server or our client machine or our front end. So in that case, we have to build an API which will communicate with your front end, take request. So it will be a request, then pass this request to our backend server. Then server will process it, pass the response to the, okay, then pass that response to the front end. So basically API works with the request, intermediate, processing, and then response. If you can see, we are not passing this response to the API. We are directly processing and forwarding the response to the front end website. So, okay, sorry. So basically API is just an intermediate between our front end and back end. So is anybody know the HTTP methods? What are the different types of HTTP methods we can use?
Get, post,
Mhm.
patch, delete,
Get, then post, then we have
patch,
patch,
delete,
anything else? Put,
put.
right, put. Okay, so what get actually works, or why we use get?
Read the data from the API.
Okay, so we can say it is a retrieve method.
Yes.
Right. So what post does?
Update. If we want to update anything.
Let's say
To write the data.
right.
the data, sir.
Yeah.
We can say when we have to create an object, then we use the post method. Yeah, but we can use the post method for updation too. But we have separate two other methods for the updating an object, which is patch and put. So what patch and put does? So patch is basically update the whole object. Okay, so let's consider you have a fields of user profile where username, user's last name, email address, and mobile number. All these four fields, if you want to update, then you will use the patch method. Or let's say if you want to just update an email address or a mobile number, then the put method is useful because put is actually used for the partial updates. And when we have to update the whole object, then we use the patch method. Okay. What about delete?
Remove the data.
To remove
Right.
the data which.
Right. So it is just an use for the deletion, for the delete purpose. Okay. So we have get, post, patch, put, delete. We are familiar with this get and post because we have commonly used it for the Django, where we used to hit the URL, and whatever the response will be, that request was the get method, or the get HTTP request. When we are submitting something from the user's perspective, then it was the post method. We are not familiar with the patch, put, and delete. Why we have to use this get, post, patch, delete, put methods? We can just simply use the get or post method. Why this patch, put, delete methods are available? Can anybody tell me?
Sir, basically, some of these methods are sent on the body and some of them are set on the head. So it depends upon a requirement.
Okay, right. So it's totally depend on the requirement, but as its name suggests, it's a REST API. It's a REST API. Sorry, we are talking about the REST API. So what the REST actually stands for? It's a representable state transition. Something. Let me check. REST form. Okay. Okay, representational state transfer. So as its name suggests, representational, we actually representing our method. We want to update something. That's why we are using patch. We want to partially update something. Then we are using put. It is a representational. So it is the faster way, or like we can say it's just an open request. But just by looking at the headers or the request, we can say it is a request for the updation of the object. It is a request for deleting an object. It is a request for getting or retrieving the object. So that's why we are using this REST API because it's a fast we can just say what these methods actually describe by looking at the headers, and it is easy for the catching. So we use the REST framework because it's fast, it's representable, and we can just see the HTTP methods by in the header, and we can decide our operation or process the operation, right? So let's start with the Django REST framework. So Django-REST-framework.org. It's an official documentation for the REST Django frameworks. I'll just copy this and share with you on chat. So if you get time, please visit this. So how Django REST framework works? So like our Django works, it takes requests from the client machine, pass this request to our Django server. But when we are using the Django REST framework, there is an intermediate of Django REST framework between Django and client machine. So that basically is an API. So we have seen something like server, Django backend, then front end. This API, we can say it is an intermediate, which is Django REST framework. So Django REST frameworks provide helper classes to build an APIs. We can build the APIs in Django too, but it provides a predefined classes with the request and response object. So it is easy to build an API in Django REST framework instead of plain Django. Okay, so if we want to build an API in Django, then we simply have to process the request and pass the JSON response. It doesn't matter is it a GET request, post request, patch, because it doesn't comes in a Django. Okay, it only comes in the REST framework because it's a REST API, and REST API stands for the representable state transitional. So which means the HTTP method should be representable what it stands for. Okay, so we have three different methods to build an API. The first one is API view sets. Then second is API view set, and then we have okay, let me check. The second method is okay, generic views. Okay, and third one is view sets. So we'll start with the API view sets. So what is API view sets? So let's say API view sets also offers a helper classes to create an API endpoint. So what is API endpoints? So let's say you have a function which which processes the request and generate a response. So that function or that particular URL pattern, when you hit that URL pattern and the request and response object get processed, that is called an endpoint of the API. So for example, you have a profile API where when you hit that API, you will get the user's profile picture or profile picture and user's personal details. Then that particular URL pattern or the function we can call it as a endpoint of that URL, endpoint of that API. So let's build a graphical user interface where you can have a user profile. Let's say it's a model user profile, and what you want a user personal details. So let's say it's your desired output. So how this procedure will be taken place? Can anybody explain me? Consider you want a user personal details from the user profile. From the API perspective, how should it has to be done?
So first we will find the particular object of the user,
Mhm.
and then we will target the particular attribute that we want to get.
Okay.
So that's how we'll get it.
Okay. Which method we are going to use from this
Get
get method?
dot get.
Dot get. Okay. The first thing we want is a user ID, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's say you have a user model which has ID, then name, and profile picture. Okay, and then you have email address,
Password.
password, and let's consider you have a mobile number. You have these attributes in your user profile. Okay, so whenever you want a user's personal detail, you have to create a get API or hit the get API. So let's have one more block which says API. So what you are going to do, first you will pass the request to the API. Let's say you have a get request with user ID 2. Okay, we can pass or get the data from the get method. How we do that? Can anybody tell me from how we can get the data from the URL? Let's say you have your development server address, then let's say you have a segment of API, then you have a function, let's call it user profile, then it's a get method, then we have to pass the variable name, not variable name, the key of the value. So let's say you have user ID equals to 2. So this will be your API URL to get the user personal details. Let's say you have a function of user profile. So let me create one more function. Okay. So it's profile which will take request. Okay. This will take request and pass the response, return HTTP response, and whatever the response is. So user profile object. So you have this function which is mapped to this URL. So whenever you hit this URL, you will get the user ID. Then you will pass this user ID to your model, get the object, process it. Process it means the way you want to represent your output. So for the February, March batch, March, April batch, we have seen something like that. When we have a user profile picture in our user profile object, and then we have to pass that object to our question and answer model, remember? So that means we have to process our data, then pass that request to our endpoint. So let's say it's a response which has some status codes. Okay, so we'll discuss what is status codes. So first, this is get method. So it will get an object from the user profile. Okay, so it will get user profile, process that data, and pass it as a response. So but in the response, it will pass it as a parameter. So the first parameter would be user profile, and second would be as a header of the status request, which means the response is correctly processed or not. So let's say when you have successfully completed your operation, the status code will be 200. That means the operation was successful. So if I go to this framework, inspect it, reflections. So if you can see, we get this 200, 200, 200. It says 304. So if I open this, so it is also 304, which has green status code. So that means we have some restriction. We cannot use it on our other server, or we can just not copy this and use in our own HTML pages. So we have this kind of status code, which is 200, that means success. We have 404, which means not found. Then we have 500, that means server error. So whenever you have an error on your server, it will respond it as a 500. When you have something called this URL is not found, then the status code will be 404. If the request is processed successfully and you will get the output, then the response would be the status code would be 200. So what data we will get from the API? The first one is actual response. The second one is status codes. Status codes are representation of the let's say status codes of your request, API request. So if the request is successfully completed, then the status code will be 200. If the request is not successfully completed, according to whatever uh, status code you have passed from your APIs, it will pass it to your response. So we can define our own status code, not the actual our own status code. That means we cannot just simply pass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can just simply change the error messages, or we can say if the 404 status code happen on your API. Consider you have a user profile. If you are getting user personal details of ID 10 and you don't have ID 10 on your object, so it will throw an exception. What exception it will throw? The user profile object does not exist. Okay, so when this exception occurs, we just simply can pass status code of 404. That means data not found or page not found, whatever the message would be, but the status code will be 404. Let's say you have something server error, you have a syntax error or something else. So your server is throwing exception 500. So we can simply just return a 500 exception status code on our response. If the process is completed, then we can just simply return 200. So this is how API view set works. So why we have to use API view set, and what is generic views and model view set? So let's discuss a bit about generic and model view set. So we will get a complete idea why we can use, why we have to use API view set and when we have to use model view set. So Django comes with the predefined functions. We already know that Django does all the things for the developer. We have to just use them according to our need. So let's say you have a model called user profile. So you can just simply write a model view set. You don't have to write a long code where you have to process the data, or where you have to get the request and pass it, process it. No, we can just simply pass it to the model view set, define our classes, our serializers. It will just simply process your data as per your model is defined. We don't have to write anything in the model view set. It will take care of everything, which means get, post, put, patch, delete. It will create this all predefined functions for us. We can just simply hit that URL and pass our HTTP method. It will create all these functions and perform the output as per our request. This is the model view set. Let's say, let's come to generic view set. It is similar to Django's generic views, where we have to define the query sets. What is query sets?
Sir,
Okay, just a minute. So can you please share what does the range of status code means, like 200 is success? That type which range means what is the error? Okay, so we'll just Google it, API status code. So we have 100, which is continue. Then we have 200, which is okay. Then we have 203, which is non-authoritative information. Let's say you have a API URL which is not accessible without a login. Okay, so if the user is not logged in, you cannot process the request, but you have to pass it as a success because user want to see what is the actual error, because our API is not failed, because our server is not failed. This is not something like we don't get the object from the user request. It is simply means we don't have an authority, that user don't have any authority to access that particular URL. So before accessing that object, he has to log in to view this function or to visit this URL. So we have to just simply return 203. Then we have 206, which is partial content. Then 300, 303. There are lots of HTTP codes. So, okay, if you visit this, you will get the complete status code. Yeah, we have 500, which is internal server error. Then we have 502, which is bad gateway. Okay, then 201, which is created. So when you post anything, you will get 201, which is created, 202, which is accepted. So let me share this URL with you. Okay, so mainly what we use the 200, then we use 301, which is moved permanently. Then we have 400, which is bad request. Then we have 401. We also use 401. We also use 403, 404. Then 500, 502. Yeah, that's it. We mainly, basically, we use only these ones. Okay, 200, then 203, then 301. Okay, then 400, 401, 403, and 404. We also use 500. Okay. Okay, so where were we? Okay, can anybody tell me what we were discussing?
So
Query
you
set.
were explaining about query set.
Query sets. Okay, so generic views are actually where we can define our own query set, and it will same like we have in model view set. We don't have to create our own methods. It will automatically create all these things, which is get, post, put, patch, delete method for us. We can override this. Okay, we can override this method, which is get, post, put, and we can define our own query set. But when you have to write a complex logic, let's say you have to update user profile as well as the user object, then you have to use the API view set because you are dealing with the two different models. But when you are dealing with the one model, go with the generic view set or model view set. They are handy because they create all the necessary things for us by default. We don't have to write anything when we are using a single model. But when we are dealing with some complex logic where we want to have a full control all over on our API, then we have to use the API view set. Okay, so is everyone clear with this? So we can start with the practical session. Anybody have any question?
No, sir.
Okay, sir, one quick go through. Okay, Vivek. So in first, we have seen what is API. API is just a simply intermediate or interface between your front end and back end. Okay, we have a different HTTP methods, which is get, post, patch, put, delete. All these methods have a different definition or different usage. For example, we use get to retrieve data. We use post to create an object or create anything on the server. We use patch and put to update data on our backend server. Patch is used for the entire object updation. Put is used for the partial updation. Same goes for the delete. We use delete to delete an object from backend. Okay, so we have API view set, generic view set, and model view set. API view set is a we can say is a complete user defined APIs where we have to write our own HTTP methods we have to use. It is built from the scratch. We have to build everything in the API view set from the scratch. Generic views and model view sets. Okay, Rakesh. Generic and model view sets are something where Django comes with the predefined classes or helper classes which we can use to build our APIs. Generic views, our templates. Yeah, Paras, we can say it is kind of similar with our generic templates, generic views, which we use to build our templates, but it is slightly different because in generic templates, we don't have patch, put, delete methods. We just have a get and post methods. So yeah, it is kind of similar. The process is similar. Just the difference is we have to process the API request instead of the Django request. So we have to process the API request and pass the response in the API response form. Okay, so we have a generic view set and model view sets, which predefined comes with the helper classes, which we can use or we can override to implement this get, post, patch, put, delete methods. Otherwise, if we don't want to override these methods, we can just simply use them for our single model object. We can have a multiple model object, then we have to inherit a serializer. That's a long procedure. So if you want a full control over on your API, then you have to use API view set. Otherwise, generic and model view sets are predefined, which comes with the predefined helper classes, which we can use, which creates a by default functions of get, post, patch, put, delete. Okay, so then we have a status code. Different status code represent the different action, or we can say different headers from the backend to the front end. Okay, is everyone clear with this? Rakesh?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Ashish.
Sir, we can work all methods in generic view as well as model view sets. Am I
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so generic. Okay, we just so the second thing is serializers. So is anybody know what is serializer mean?
No, sir.
So
Okay.
little bit, it serializes our object and
Mhm.
gives us the JSON format.
Okay, yeah, correct. Let's say when you are passing data from the API, so it is not in a format of Django's native data objects. Okay, it might be from the JSON, it might be XML, it might be a form data. So what the serializer just convert it to Python's native data objects. Okay, so we have a control, we can just simply convert them before passing it to the client machine or front end or the start point of our API. So serializers are basically a conversion method which convert request to the Python native data objects. Okay, so it is a kind of similar like we have in a Django forms. Okay, so let's start with the practical. So we'll go through with this documentation first. So it needs Python 3.5 and Django 2.2 minimum requirement. So if you are using Python 2 or Django 1.2, then the rest framework won't work. So you have to be on the latest version of the Python and Django. So let's start with the project. Okay, so let me create one directory. Call it rest. Let's navigate to that directory. Okay, March, April batch. Can you please tell me how we can create a project? Start project, project name. I want to create the project in same directory. Okay, right, Vivek. Python manage.py, start project, project name. But before that, we have to create our virtual environment. So let's create our virtual environment. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I have named my virtual environment to VE and V. So let's start with it. Okay, so let's activate our virtual environment. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is install Django. So we install Django. We are going to use the latest version of Django, so we are not specifying anything. Enter. Okay, after installing Django, we have to fire a command, start project, project name. So why do we create virtual environment? Okay, Paras, let's say you have a different projects which uses a different Django versions. So if you are working on the project one which works on Django 3.2 or 3.1, and you have a different project which works on 1.6 or 2.6, then it will create a conflict because the latest version which is installed globally on your system will override the previous version of the Django on your old project. So that's where we have to isolate our project environment for our own project. So if you are dealing with the one project, then we have our isolated environment for that particular project. So it doesn't conflict with the other projects. So if we are using any third-party libraries or plugins, it won't conflict with the others project plugins. Okay. So we have activated our virtual environment. Okay, Paras, you guys don't know virtual environment?
Yes, sir, I know, but I didn't
Okay,
know why we used.
okay, no problem. Okay, so we have activated our virtual environment and we have installed our Django. Then just let's create project. So Django
Sir, are we
admin,
creating new project for REST framework?
right?
Okay. Sir,
Okay,
please increase font.
okay, just a minute. We are going to complete our own project which we have built on the next session, not in the next session, but the upcoming session. Okay, is it visible now?
Okay, sir.
Okay, so start project, yes. Then I have to create a project in the same directory. So dot, now we have created our project. So let's just check it. Server. Okay, so let's go to our browser. Okay, it's working. So the first thing we have to do is install a REST framework. Okay, so I'll just copy this, go back to Visual Studio, open our project, which is REST. Okay, then we will create a new file, which is requirements.txt. Okay, and then we will add a Django because we have already installed the Django. And second thing is Django REST framework. Okay, Then let's go back to our console, then pip install REST framework, hit enter. Okay, so it's installing. Okay, it's already installed. So let me go back to console and hit the migrations. Okay, yeah. File, make migrations. Okay, migrate. Okay, and let me open the database. Okay, now we have installed our Django REST framework. So the first thing we have to do, we have to install in our setting file, and the list is installed app. So we have to pass, install or link our app to our Django setting file. So let me go back to Django document, Django REST framework documentation, and uh, it says add REST framework to your installed app setting. So we have to install the REST framework in our setting file. So let me just add it, save it, go back to console, and again hit the migrations. Okay, so Python manage.py migrations. So before, okay, let's just first create our migrations. Okay, it says no changes detected. Migrate. Okay, it again says no changes detected. Sorry, we are not using the authentication token yet. Okay, so we have successfully installed our REST framework. Now the first thing we have to do is create a URL pattern for our API, right? So for that, first we create an application or app which holds all our application, APIs endpoints. So how to create an app? What is command to create an app? Start app. Okay, Arvind. What is the complete command to create an app? Python manage.py start app, then our app name. So we'll call it API. Okay, so we have created our app. So let's just go to urls.py file of set of the core project file and include API include and API.urls. Again, we have to include the include package. Okay, now let's just create a URL file for the APIs. So urls.py. Okay, we have created a urls.py file. Then we just simply copy this URL pattern, paste it here. We don't need URLs include package, so we just remove this. Okay, now we need to import our views function from views, current directory, import views. Okay, so we have imported our views. Okay, so let's just create our one API endpoint. So let's call it API view set. Okay, and views dot, let's say we have a, okay, here is a trick. So earlier we have seen a function based view, right? We have to define a function, something like this, their function, then function name, then we will pass the request object and return our HTTP response. Right? But when we are dealing with the API, we said we have to create a class for functions, class for the views. Okay, we have seen the function based view. Now we have to work on the class based view. So how to create a class based view? first thing is we need to define a class. Let's call it test. Okay. Then let's say you have to create a get method API. So you have to define a function within the class, which is get. Then you have to respond. Same if you want to build or have a function with the post method, then same goes to post. Okay, you will have a parameters like request and sell on your function. Then again, you will process your request as the response. So we can say we will have response. Okay, then again we have a response, but before response we will have our processing. Okay, so this is how you create your class-based view. Okay, if you go back to your Django REST framework documentation and visit the API guide and open your views, then you will see they are using the class-based view, not the function-based view. We have to define a function within the class, and the class would be work as a single endpoint for all of your methods. What are the methods? Get, post, put, patch, delete. You have to just define your method or hit the same URL for different operations. Okay, so we'll create our first API, class-based view. So you have to first import certain things from the REST framework, which is views and response. Why we have to import the response? We can just simply use the HTTP response, and also in models we have to create classes. Yeah, Abhishek, we can define our classes in forms, serializer, function, models, views, everything we can define within the class, and we can use it. Why we have to use the class-based view? Because we can inherit this class-based view to the other classes. Okay, we cannot do the same thing for the function-based view. That's why we have to use the class-based view. There is a difference between class-based view and function-based view. What is the difference? We cannot inherit this, but we can inherit this for the other functions, for the other views. And the second thing is, when you are dealing with the function-based view, you have to write the if condition to check whether it's a get method or post method, right? But when you are dealing with the class-based view, there are predefined functions we have to use. We have to use the get function for the get request. We have to use the post function for the post request. So it is easy to understand. Okay, both have a different cons and pros. So it's totally depend on when you're dealing with the Django, not with the REST framework. So it's totally depend on your preference, what view function you have to use. Can we use class-based view in Django? Yeah, we are actually using the class-based view in Django. It's a Django, not the REST framework.
Sir, what you said, we can inherit.
Inherit this class to the another class. So let's call, you have another class, called it as a test one. You can just simply inherit.
Okay, sir, got it.
Okay, this is not the actual syntax. I'm just telling you, you can perform the inheritance within the views function. Okay, so let's start with our first class. So we have created our API view path. So when we are dealing with the function-based view, we just pass the class function name, and the third parameter, it is optional parameter. So when you are dealing with the class-based view, you have to mark it as view function. So it will understandable. Yeah, it is a class-based function which we have to convert or treat as a views function. Okay, so within the classes we have a get and post methods. So that's why we have to define this as views. Okay, it's a method which will translate or understandable for the Django. Yeah, it's a view function for this particular URL pattern. Okay, so we are not going to use API test name. We are going to use, let's say, hello API. Okay, then let's close this URL files. Okay, in the view function we saw earlier, we have to import certain things, which is API views and response. Why we have to import a response when we can just simply return something like this? Can anybody tell me why we have a different API responses? We can just simply return an HTTP response. Is anybody have any idea why it should be something like this, not HTTP response?
Sir, maybe because HTTP response will render something on the page, and it depends upon a requirement whether we want an object as a response, we want a template.
Okay, yeah, partially it is correct. But when you are dealing with the APIs, you can also return an HTML pages. Okay, if you want to try, you can just use the Postman and hit your one of your already built projects. So you will get the HTML page as a response. Okay, the reason is okay, the reason is when we are dealing with the response, either it should be in the form of JSON or XML, right, Paras? Because JSON and XML are the only response where the client machine can be understand. Okay, either it should be a JSON or XML. Is anybody know the difference between XML and JSON?
Sir, XML is little heavy and JSON is little light.
Right,
That's the one difference.
right, right. And can anybody tell me what is actually a JSON?
Sir, it's
JSON is
actually an
Java
object, collection of
object
objects,
notation. Yes.
JavaScript object notations.
Okay, right. It is a JavaScript object notation, and it handles a data. Okay, just like HTML represent the data. So what is XML? Yeah, Rishi, it's just a data handler. Like HTML is a data representative. So XML is just like a data handler. It will handle your data, which is responsible for request and response for the APIs. So we can get the API response either in JSON or in XML. So XML looks like something like, oops, okay, something like where you have a user ID, not the exact syntax. I'm just showing you the mockup. Okay, so let's say you have something like user ID is equal to 2. Then you have another XML for profile picture, profile underscore picture. Then you have your value. Let's say it is 1.jpg. This is not the actual syntax of XML, but it is similar, something like that. So, for example, you have user profile as a dictionary. Pass this user profile as a dictionary, which is 2D data, consists 2D data. In the profile picture, you have two separate fields. One is user ID, second is profile picture. And the same looks like in your JSON. User profile, then you have another dictionary, or we can say list. Your user ID, the value, then you have your profile picture and your value. So both are actually same. Both are holds the same data, but the representations are different, or handling the data is kind of different. So here it is an hierarchy of your tags. Okay, and it is a 2D object. We can say, sir, please speed little bit slow. Okay, Prachi. So, okay, what we were saying. Okay, so it is just like your dictionary object, the similar kind of which we used in our Django. The same. If we go with these double quotes, then it is a JSON object. So let's say we have one dot OPG. So both represent the both handles the same data, but the representation or handling of that data is kind of different from each other. So this is the hard way of handling the data. It is a soft way of handling the data. It is lightweight. It is heavy because you have a hierarchy of multiple objects or multiple tags, not objects, sorry, multiple tags. And when you are dealing with this JSON, you have key value pairs in a single dictionary or single list. I'm not sure what it is called in JSON or in the JavaScript. Either it's a dictionary or object. Oh, sorry, it's an object, sorry. So we can use JSON in any language as it is object format. Yeah, Paras, we can use JSON in any language. We can use it in Java, PHP, or either in the JavaScript, which is Node. We can use JSON in any language. JSON is supported by every language, just like the XML is supported by the every languages. Okay, so in the views, not in the views. Okay, on the yeah, in the views, we have this response object which will take care of the data which is understandable to the front end requester. Okay, so it will convert your data which is understandable to the front end requester, and front end requester which only understand two kinds of data. One is the XML and second one is the JSON object. So this will convert your native Python dictionary or list or objects or query sets into something which is understandable by the front end. Let's example, you have a React as a front end, so React will only understand JSON objects. Am I right? Or it also understand the XML?
That it understand, I think both
Okay,
XML and JSON both.
okay, Roshan. So other than it will not accept anything, either a single string or HTML pages, nothing. It will only understand two kinds of data, which is XML or JSON. The same goes for the Android application or iOS applications. They only understand JSON or XML. So that's why we have to make our APIs a universal, which is callable by the any front end, and it will be passed or get the response and process it and do whatever the desired of output was. So the APIs are the universal functions. If you hit the API from the your front end, either you hit your API from the Android application, from anything or anywhere, you will get the same output. Okay, so API doesn't vary from the platforms. It will be same for the application, sorry, mobile application as well as the web application. So that's why we have to use response function. So let me just copy this. One is the REST framework views function or views object. So let me just delete this. I don't want the HTTP response. Okay, we are dealing with the API views and the response. There are two ways to import anything. The first one is something like this, and second one is from REST framework, then import views, then we can import response. Okay, when you are importing something like this, okay, so when you are importing something like this, then you have to pass it as a, let's say, return response, then the response object. Okay, and when you have this kind of imports, then you have to not pass this response, you have to just directly write the response function. Okay, so which way you prefer most easy or for you? Which imports we can follow? First one or second one?
Second one.
Okay. Okay, so we'll follow the second one. Why this kind of imports? Because we have to just import the views and response which is in the single line. If we have a multiple imports, then it would be something like, let's say, hot token. We have serializers. Yeah, I forget this kind of serializer. Okay, serializer. So it will create a mess. So that's why we are going to use the single import functions, which will import views as well as response, but we have to use it as an object and then call its required functions. So we'll delete everything in our views file and we'll create our first class-based view for our application endpoint, sorry, API endpoint. So let's go back to documentation. So you can see we have to import the API views, which is right there. So let's go back to our Visual Studio. Okay, then define a class, and what was our class name? URL. Okay, it was hello API. So let's create hello API. We cannot directly use now the API view. Okay, so we have to first use the views object, then call the API attribute. Okay, so
Hello,
now,
sir.
yeah, Ashish.
Sir, class-based view is different from API view set, generic view, and model view set, or
No, no,
any relation
all
between this?
all are same.
Okay.
Only the definitions are same. Only the processing and the writing of methods are different. Okay, when you are dealing with the model view set, you don't have to write this def function for the get postcode. You have to just define your serializer. That's it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So let's create our first get API. So let's create def. It will take two parameter, which is self, and second one is request. There is also a third parameter, which is format IKS. Yeah. Okay. So we have to take this format as well. What this format means, it's simply JSON or XML or a string, whatever the format type we will see, we will request, it will convert that, or we can use it to process the different outputs. So that's why we have to use this format. If you don't use this format, it's okay. But if you are using, you have to define it for the null. Null. Okay, so let's create a list API views list. Okay, so the first object of the list would be this is the API. Okay, we are using API set object in our list. Then we have to return a response. Then again we have to use the response object and then response. Okay, now we have to just simply pass this. That's it. So if we don't define any kind of HTTP request code, sorry, response code, then by default it is a 200. Okay, so we are not defining anything. So if you don't define anything in your response, by default it's a 200 request. So let me show you. When I go back to console, run the server. Okay, so what it says, hello API has no attribute as views. Okay, so I think we have write something wrong in our syntax. Let's go back to home page. Okay, it might be views instead of views. Okay, it's working. So let's go back to our browser and hit our server. So if I visit the API, okay, so it says page not found because we have API view set. Okay, so let's just visit this URL pattern. Okay, why it is not showing? We put this. Okay, we have not added this forward slash. Okay, if I go back, hit enter. Okay, so we got this predefined function, predefined HTML function. Okay, we have not built this function. If you can see, we don't have render any kind of HTML pages. We have just simply passed this response, which is this API list, API view list. So how this API view function or template comes. So when you are dealing with the Django REST framework, it provides you an interface from where you can hit your API, test your API. Okay, this is the one way you can test your API. And the second method is either you can use the Postman. Is anybody know what is Postman?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what it is?
So we use Postman to see what a response is getting generated to the particular link. It provides us the JSON object, and we can check whether the query is working or not.
Okay, so this is the Postman. I'll share the link in the chat box. Okay, so either you can use this view or you can download the Postman. Postman would be better for your development purposes because you can just simply create your collections of APIs. So let me open the Postman because I have already downloaded it. Okay. Okay, so let's just download the Postman. Okay.
Sir, in the meantime, is it mandatory that we need to use Postman for some any other feature, or can same be done in the extension that is Thundercloud or Thunderbird?
Thunderbird, I guess the cloud storage, right?
Yes, there is one extension Pranvi sir had mentioned. So we just wanted to know whether is that okay, or there is some additional things that we get to see in Postman.
You can collect, you can have collection of your APIs, which we can later you can share with the other developers too. So that's why the Postman is preferable.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and you can have a sign in or login, or if you import on your Postman, then you can use it on the different machine too with the same collection of your APIs. Okay, Rishi, sir, can you please repeat what is Postman network Postman? Okay, Rishi, so the Postman is just a way to check whether your APIs are working or not. So where you can request your API and it will give you a response. That's it. Okay. So for example, we cannot see a API response in the console, right? So it's a developer tool which is used to test your APIs. That's it. So let me just install the Postman. So okay, for the fast development, you can use this Django's REST framework default API plugin or tool. But you can, if you can use this Postman, it would be better. From starting, please explain the Postman. Okay, Rakesh, Postman is a developer tool which is used to test your APIs. Okay. So let's just check the API response till that. We get this. This is the get API. We are using the API view set, and if you can see, we have HTTP 200, which is okay, and the methods are allowed, which is get, head, and options. These options are actually required when you are dealing with the Android applications. So instead of get, it will give you option. So you have this option also. If you press this option, you will get the same, not the same, okay. You will get the details of that API. The first, what was the name of that API? If you had any description, then it will be shown. What kind of data it's holding. So it's, we can say it's just a kind of headers. So it's render actually an application JSON. Okay, it's a JSON object. Then how we should have to parse it, then we have these options, which is application JSON. Then second option, we have application X form URL encoded. Then we have multi-form, multi-part form data. These are the different options which we see on our headers. So this is actually a headers. And when you are dealing with the Android application or the Flutter, I'm not sure, Flutter or Android, but when you are dealing with this kind of front end or the API requester, then the request would be option instead of get. Okay, here we can get the API as a format. Then we can have a JSON as a format. So this is your JSON format, which is plain JSON format. You can just copy this and use it. So that's why we have to use this format parameter, which we by default set none. If I just remove this, go back, hit refresh, still you will get this JSON output. Okay, so it's not mandatory that you should have a format tag. It's just for the development purpose. Okay, so our JSON, okay, our Postman has started. So I already have an account, so I will log in. If you don't have any account, just create one. So let me check this account. Okay, sign in with Google. Okay, good. Okay, so this is our Postman homepage. We can have this new. Okay, so we got this new settings. It is an updated version of Postman. So why it's not working? Okay, sorry. So what you have to do, you have to create the new. Okay, this is the exact same window. Oh, sorry, here it is. You can see the create new API. So you have to create this create new. Then there are multiple options. One is HTTP request, which is for the REST APIs. Then you have a socket request. You can paste your socket to. Then you have collections. What is collections? You can create your multiple APIs request in the form of collection, store it. Then if you want to import or export that API collection, you can just simply export that, import in another computer, and use that collection over there. Then you have environment and workspace, but we are going to use only HTTP request. So let's create an HTTP request. Okay, so okay, so what we get in this Postman, first we get this multiple methods, which is get, post, put, patch, delete, which we have already seen. Then we have copy, head, options, link, unlink, purge, lock, unlock, off, find, views. We are not going to use all of these. because either some of them are not supported by the Django REST framework, which is prop find, unlock, lock, purge is also not supported, link unlink, views is also not supported. Options head, copy, I'm not sure about the copy, but options head, delete, patch, put, post, these methods are supported by the Django REST framework. So we are going to use them. So the first thing we have to do, we have to enter our URL. So let's enter our URL. Okay. And our controller or the first segment name. So our first segment name was API. So let me enter API. Then we have our URL pattern, which is API user. Okay, that's it. Then use this send button. So when we use this send button, it will transfer the request to our backend and collect the response. And the response was, this is the get API. We are using API view set. If you go back to our class function, class based view, then you can see we have created this list. We have just simply rendered this list or pass this list to our response. That's why we are getting this response. If I just go back and add some additional attributes to the list. So let's say first attribute, then let's have second attribute, we have third attribute also, third attribute. If I save, go back to Postman and again hit this send button, I will get this list. Okay, so if I go click on the raw, so this is the raw response. If I click on the preview, so this is the preview. If you are passing any HTML, then you will get this HTML response. Okay, let me just visit the admin panel and send. So you will get the HTML response. Okay, if you go to raw section, you will get this raw kind of HTML. If you go to this pretty section, then it is just an HTML. So you can create any endpoint or you can visit any endpoint from the Postman. It's just a developer to visit your endpoint. So it doesn't matter, it should be an API endpoint or normal HTTP endpoint. It will return anything or pass anything in the different kinds of visualizations. So let's stick to
Sir,
the API.
visualize.
Sorry.
Visualize.
Okay, visualize. Set up visualizer per request. Okay, Ashish, I'm not sure what this visualize does because it's newly added in this version. So
Okay, sir.
I will explain it to in your next session. Okay, so it's again called API view set. Okay, now let's create a post API because to know how this get API works, we have to define a class. Then we should have a then we should have defined our get method, how the post method will work. So let's create a post method. So let's call it post. We can take two parameters. One is self, second one is request. Okay, in the post method, we will just simply return an let's say a list value. Okay, so this value is the first object of the list values. This is the post API. We are just simply returning this. Okay, then again we have to return the response. Return response or response. Then our list value. So let's go back to our Django's predefined API tester, hit this. So now we got something else. Earlier it was just this section. Now we got this form kind of thing. Okay, from where we can just select JSON or URL encoded format or form data. So we got this section because we have added this post. That's why it it has created a section from where we can submit our data. So if I go back and print our request.post, okay, server is running. So let's go back and add our content. So let's say user. So I'll just print my name. Okay, if I hit this post, I will get the response. What was the response? This is the post API. We are simply just returning this. And if I go back to our console, okay, we got this empty dictionary. Why have we got this empty dictionary? Does anybody have any idea? Let me just print this
Because
request
we have
object
no
only.
data.
Sorry. Okay. Can you please repeat it again?
Because we have no data in it.
Okay, we have passed that data from the post method. Okay, let me just again pass it. User. Okay, so post it again. Okay, is our server running? Okay, again we have to pass the data. Let's say user, then I will enter my name. Okay, so we have created this dictionary, not dictionary, it's an JSON object. So let me just post this data. So we will get this response. The response is this is the post API. We are just simply returning a list, and we have passed this list as a response. After processing our request, let's consider we are processing our request on this section. So let me print it. Okay, we have already printed this. So the request object contain REST framework request.request, which is post, and our API, which is format and anything else. So why our object or the data was not shown? Can anybody tell me?
Sir, because we are posting, but we are not saving it.
I don't think so. That was the case.
Sir, I think we have to explicitly define request.post.get in bracket, something like that.
Request.post.
Get.
Let me write it down. You are saying something like request.post.
In square bracket user,
Okay, user.
and in print function print.
Okay, so let's have a let's call it user, and then we just print this user. Okay, so let's go back to console, refresh our server, then again go back to API. Let me clear this. Okay, so when we hit this URL, we get this HTTP request, which is 200. Why? Because it was a GET request. Now we are performing a POST request. Okay, so let's just post this before posting it. Our server is working. So when I hit this post, okay, we got something multi-value dictionary error. Okay, yeah, Ashish, we got this multi-value dictionary error. When we are using your method, we got this multi-value dictionary error. So let's try a different method. One was get, right? You can get the user data from get function also, right or not? Okay, so let's go back to our URL. Again, hit enter. The first URL enter was the get request. Let's again pass our data, post it. We again got the response, but still we don't get our data. Okay, we got this none value. Any guess why we are getting this none value? Any idea? If I could say it's not, let's say it is not understandable by the Django. We have discussed something like serializer. Is it because of that? Okay, let me show you one more thing. If I go back, the body, let's create a form data. User is equal to, okay, I have added my name. If I send that request, okay, sorry, it should be a post request, which our server is working. Okay, we got the response, and if you can see, we got this name also, Salahuddin Sheikh. But earlier, when we are dealing with this Django's predefined function, we are not getting anything. So the reason was Postman, when Postman actually making a post request, it's making as a form data, right? And we have seen Django works as a form that when we submit a HTML, when we submit a form data from the HTML pages, we use this post.get method, right? But when we are sending it from this Django section, it was a JSON request. It was a JSON object, not a form data, right? That's why we have to build a serializer. Okay, this is why, this is the actual reason we need to use a serializer to get the user request, because if someone is using the Postman, it will get the response. But when someone are using this kind of any interface, then it will not get any response, or the user will not get any kind of the request object or the data from the request, from the user request. So that's why the serializers are coming to picture, and this is the reason why we have to use the serializer. Okay, we are not going to use the serializer right now. We see the serializer later. We are just focusing on the HTTP methods. Okay, is everyone clear why we have to use this serializer? Because when we are submitting this JSON object from the Django's interface, then it wasn't handling with the backend. But when we are passing the values from the form data and catching that value from the post.get method, it was showing our data. Why? Because it is the method to get the form data, not the JSON object, right? So that's why the serializers, we have to use the serializers because of the same reason. Okay, is everyone clear with this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what about
Hello,
Roshan?
sir.
Yeah, Roshan.
Sir, in media, there were other responses, like there were URL encoded response.
Okay,
So,
in which?
sir, in the main function of that Django,
Okay.
yeah. So there were media type other response,
Mhm.
URL encoded. So what
Mhm.
kind of response it gives? Like JSON gives JSON response. So what does that form URL encoded kind of response give?
Okay, let me show you. Okay, Vivek. The problem is, Vivek, first I'm going to answer the Vivek's question. Okay, the problem is, Vivek, when we are submitting the form with the form data, okay, we can submit the form data from the Postman. It will take care of the form data submission and that multi-part value we have to use in the form tags. So this is something like we are submitting the data from the form tag. Okay, but when we are submitting the data from this content or the Django's interface, let me hit the refresh and make it is a get request. Okay, so it is a get request. So when we are submitting something or making a post request, this is a JSON object, not the form data. So again, okay, so if I post this request, we will get the response, but we are not getting any values in our backend. Okay, and the reason was because it was a JSON object, not the form data, but when we are submitting the values from the form data, just like I did in this Postman. So we'll get this user data, which was submitted by the form because we are using this form data. Same thing if I go back and change it to raw and I can pass it as a dictionary, JSON object. Let's see will it work or not. So if I can send this request. Okay, so what we got this unsupported media type, which is API view said. Again, if I hit the send sending button, again we got this unsupported media type. So different kinds of data submission won't work with this post.get and the object the key name. So we have to use this serializer. What serializers does? Serializer simply convert the different kinds of data object or JSON files or XML, not the files, JSON object or XML objects into Python native data types, which is the query set, object, dictionary, list, tuple, set, what else? Okay, so it will convert everything to Python understandable data object. Okay, that's why we have to use the serializers. Now you got it, Vivek? Hello, Vivek. Okay, good. Is everyone clear with the serializers thing? So we can move to the next HTTP method.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what else? Okay, the next HTTP method. What is the next? What was the next HTTP method on our what it was? Okay, on our diagram. So we have seen get or post, get and post. So now we will see patch put. Okay. So let me create one more function which is patch send request. If you guys notice, we are not creating anything as its name suggests. This get function actually works as a retrieve function. Yeah, that's fine. But this post function is not creating any object. Is it okay or not? Just like what we are going to do in the patch method, we are going to just simply return a response. We are not updating anything. So is it okay, or this is how it works? What do you think? Hello.
Sir, repeat question.
Okay. Just like I said, get method is used to retrieve a data. Post method is used to create an object or anything on our database. Same goes for the patch and put. Patch is used to update the entire object. Put is used to update a partial object. Delete is used to delete an object. But we are not doing any kind of the stuff in our APIs. We are not creating anything on the post, but still we are getting the response. We are creating the patch, not uh, patch method. Yeah, okay. We are not creating any updating any patch values, but still we are going to get a response. Let me create a response for that. Okay, if I go back and hit the refresh button, let me minimize this. If I hit the refresh button, why we don't get the patch method?
Sir, actually, patch spelling was wrong. There it was written path.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's go back to browser, hit the refresh button. Now you will get this patch section. Okay, but we are not going to create or update any object. So still our APIs are working or not. But if you can remember, I already said get is used to retrieve data, post is used to create a data, patch is used to update a data, delete is used to delete a data. But we are not doing anything in our APIs. We are just simply passing our response objects.
Sir,
Mhm. Yeah.
first of all, patch we use for update partial data and put for update entire data. Am I right?
No, update put is, yeah, sorry, put is used to update the entire data. Patch is for the partial data. Sorry, I was wrong. Okay, so let me clear one thing. Put is used to update the whole data and patch is used to update a partial data. Okay, sorry, I was misinterpret that sequence. Okay, yeah, now go on, Ashish.
And because of we added patch in our class, that's why it is showing UI for patch.
Okay, but my question was, we are not updating anything. Okay, I already said put and patch is used to update an object. Post is used to create an object. Delete is used to delete an object. But we are not doing anything. We are not dealing with the object. Still, it is an API. We can call it APIs, RESTful APIs.
Maybe Django has some data in it in database.
No, if I go back to our database, we don't have any kind of extra tables after installing our REST framework. Okay, auth, group permission, user, group option, then log, contain, migration session, sequences. All these are comes with the Django only. So REST framework does not have any effect on our database. We can simply say it as an API and API or not, because we are not doing as its name suggests. We can call it still APIs. Okay, the answer is yes. API doesn't have to process anything. API is just a simply request and response. Okay, response is something like we have processed something, then we are passing that response, right? So it's still these all are the APIs, but we are not dealing with any kind of objects yet. Okay, but we are accepting a request and passing a response in a form of JSON objects. So that's why it is still an APIs. But as its name suggests, we are not dealing with the objects. We are not serving its purpose, but we are still calling it from the front end or back end, and we are getting the response in the form of the understandable format, which is JSON. Am I right? So we can call it as an API. Still call it as an API. Okay, so let's have a patch method. So let's go back to our browser. Let me minimize everything. Okay, so if I, okay, what was the responsive patch? Okay, this is just a patch. So let's go back to browser, hit the refresh. When we are hitting the refresh, we got the get response. When we are posting something, then we will got the post response. Now we are going to hit the patch button, then we should have a response, which is, this is just a patch method. Okay, so if I hit the patch, okay, this is just a patch method. Okay, and if you can see the allow methods, now we got this get, post, patch, head, and option. If I go back and comment this, I can go back and hit refresh. So the patch method was gone. So whenever or whatever the methods you are adding, it will show in the allow methods. Okay, let me uncomment this again and create one more method, which is put. put is used to, okay, let me add the comments. Patch is used for the partial updates. Send request. Put is used to entire object update, or let's say an update. So we'll have list is equal to this is method. Okay, so I just written a response, then our list. Okay, so if I go back to our browser, if I click the enter, so I will now have a put and patch. Okay, this is put method. When I hit the patch, this is just a patch method. So this is how you can update your
Hello,
object.
sir.
Yeah.
So can you use another type of media type? Like there are URL encoder. What does actually it
Okay.
mean?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot your
Yeah.
question. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, we are already printing the user. So if I again hit this, okay, so if I post this, so again we will get the response. But when I go back to console, it still shows the none. Why? Because we are not dealing with the X form URL encoded. What this X form URL encoded means. So let's just Google
Is
this.
it XML response?
I'm not sure. Let me just check. X form. Okay. So what it is, application form data. So it is a post data, and I understand the post browser only. Okay, this was the question. Summary: if you have binary, non-alpha numeric data or significantly sized payload to transmit, otherwise use. Okay. Mission content of the post as user content content suppose the purpose of post and needs depending on the type of the amount of data. Okay, and methods will be more efficient than the other. To understand why you have to look at what is the best will cover. The method sent to the server is essentially one giant query string. Okay. So let's consider you are dealing with the multiple big data which is uploaded by the we can say, let me open Amazon. Okay. Okay, and if I go back to if I go to today's date and open anything, so you will get this. We have this long query string. It's still it is a short, but when you are dealing with the Google and searching anything, let's search URL encoded. So you will get this kind of long query string. So when you are dealing with this something like this and still submitting your form, okay, this is also one of the example. And second is when you have a multiple large data. Consider you are dealing with the thousands of records, not the thousands, or millions of records, or you are passing the millions of records. So the form data would be die if you upload anything which is more than, I guess, 3 MB, 30 MBs in the size. It will get hanged. Your server will get the connection timeout error because it wasn't expecting that kind of data, that big data. So that's why we have to use this www.form URL encoded or multi-part form data. So you are dealing with the multiple kind of forms data. If you guys remember, we have seen something when we are dealing with the files. We have files object as well as we have the post object. So when you have big data with the multiple form data, then either you can use this form URL encoded, or otherwise you can use the multi-form data. Multi-form data is for the small scale data type, small scale data, and X form URL encoded are used for the large data. Okay, then we had something which is multiple form data. So multiple form data is the same, just like the difference is short data or long data. That's it. And the form data is something like which we are submitting it from the postman. It mimics the same thing which is we do in the HTML pages in the form tags. So if we submit the data from the form tag or the form data, we will get the response in this request.post.get method. Okay, but if you are passing something in the JSON format, we won't get any data in our request object. We'll get the data in the request object, but not in the form of the post method. Okay, so we have this different kind of form submission type. Mainly we use this application JSON because in the React or in the Flutter, in the app, what it is, Android, you will pass the data in the JSON format, or you will expect the data in the JSON format only. Okay, there is a case when you have to use the multi-part form data, and that case is when you have to upload a file from the API, to the API. So then you have to use this multi-part form data. Otherwise, it will be okay to use JSON application, not okay to be used. It is the only way to use the APIs for most of the cases. Okay, so let's create one more function which was so we'll just copy this, change the name, let's call it delete, and change the response name delete list. Okay, so let's go back to our browser, hit enter. So okay, nothing happens. Okay, now we got this delete option. So whenever I hit this delete button, it will ask me, are you sure, kind of warning. If I said yes, I will get this response. Okay, so we have seen get, post, put, patch, delete methods. These are the methods which we can use in the API view sets. Okay. Where is the documentation? Okay, here it is. So in next session, we are going to use serializers, as well as we are going to use the view sets and generic views. Okay, and then we are going to use authentication, permission classes. Also, we will see this pagination, then exceptions, status codes. We'll see this status codes in the upcoming session. Yeah, okay. Is anyone have any question in the today's session? Hello.
Sir, just one off-topic question.
Mhm.
At the last that you mentioned all the topics, so these are the only topics which we are gonna cover, right?
Not the only topics. We are going to cover these topics too.
Okay, sir.
Okay. For the February, not March, April batch, we have created one project. After basic understanding of this APIs view sets and API generic views, we are going to create the APIs for that project. Not the project, for that project. Okay, we have something clone of Reddit where user can post a question, multiple users can answer that question, or even users can also comment on the answers as well. User had their own profile, login, logout function, registration. So we are going to create the APIs for that project. Okay, so I will share the link, GitHub repository link with you, you guys. Then you can just simply download it, check it, what we have done, And then in the next week, yeah, I guess in the next week session, we are going to create the APIs for that project.
Okay, sir.
No, Vivek, we are going to actually first implement the what was that topic? Okay, views, generic views. Then we are going to use serializers. What is serializers field? We are going to use the validation for our APIs. Then we have to see the authentication and permission classes. And then we are going to build our project. And in our project, we are going to use this filtering, pagination options, or the status code. Okay. So I guess in the second session, we will see the APIs, usage, or model APIs. Okay. So can you request ma'am to share this recording as soon as possible? Let me check the recording is on or not. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll ask her to send the recording as soon as possible.
Sir, please open diagram, architecture diagram.
Okay, this is not the architecture diagram, Ashish. It's just a layout.
Uh, Sir,
Mhm.
go a little bit below.
Okay,
Huh. Sir, this three views is a subpart of class-based view.
okay, it is not a part of class-based view. It is actually a class-based views. Both three of them.
Okay, means this is three types of class-based view.
No, actually, I not getting the API class-based views. Class-based views are just a way of writing your functions. So in the APIs, we don't write the functions because we don't have access to the get, post, put, patch methods in the functions. Then that's why we have to use the only classes. And classes supports this API view set, generic view set, and model view sets. Okay, these are the helpers to create our classes. So we are going to inherit this and then override our function or see the outputs.
Okay, sir, got it.
Okay. Uh, okay. Anyone have any question or issue the topic which is not familiar? Still you find it is difficult to understand. So let me know. I will try to clear it. Rakesh, Alkesh, Ankit, Anuj, Arvind, Ashish, Ganesh, Nikita, Abhishek, Roshan, Saikat, Suraj, Vivek. Yeah, Rakesh. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
We can pass data to the Django API in form format and JSON format. Am I right?
Yeah, we can form in the multiple format. That's why we are going to use the serializer.
Okay, means in latest website or new website and Android mobiles, they use JSON format to pass data instead of form format.
Yeah, kind of. But the case is different when you are submitting or updating, sorry, uploading a file. Then you have to use the form data because the file cannot be uploaded in the JSON format.
And in JSON format, we can pass header too, but we cannot pass in a form data header.
Headers to in the kind of which kind of headers?
Headers. Can you
We,
show?
yeah, okay, got your question. We can pass the headers in the form data too. Okay, we have this header field, so we can pass the headers in the form data too. Either in the XWW form in URL encoded, raw, binary, graph QL, whatever the type is, we can pass the header. If you remember, we passed the CSRF token, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
okay, so the CSRF token actually goes in the header to in the header section. we can see that header CSRF token in our request object, but actually it is present in the meta tags. Okay, so if you are making a request on the from the JSON, no, from the Ajax, then you will have to use the CSRF token in your header instead of your form data. So the CSRF token goes in the header. So we use the headers in all of the formats, not in the just in the JSON format.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Rakesh, you were telling something. Okay, what is serializer? Okay, he's asking Vivek. Let's consider we are submitting the data from these form data. Form data, what is form data? When you are submitting something within the form. Okay, if you are submitting a form, that is form data. But if you are submitting a JSON object, it is not a form data. It's just a raw data or the JSON object, right? So the problem is we cannot get the JSON object in the request.post.get and the user. Okay, we have to use the get list or something else, but we are not sure it is supported by the other data types or not. For example, if you're submitting a value in the XML format, then might be the case is different to get the object or get the keys. So that's why we have to use the serializer. What serializer does, serializer convert your submitted data into something which can be understandable by the Python. Or we can say serializer convert your data types into Python native data types. Requested, sorry, the submitted data into the Python native objects or the list or the dictionary, tuple, sets, whatever we are going to define. So serializer convert your data into the Python understandable format. And what is Python understandable format? Query set, object, list, dictionary, set, tuples, all these are the Python data types. Only Python understand this kind of data types, nothing else. Okay, Vivek? Okay, the object we pass through JSON, let me show you. Okay, suppose we have a JSON called user profile. Okay, then let's say not the user profile, sorry. Here's a value of my name. Then let's say we have age. Then it will contain the value of my age. Then suppose we have a mobile number. It will contain my mobile number. So these are the example of JSON objects. Okay, and how it will be look like in the form object. So let me go to HTML page. Okay, so we will have the form tag. We will have an import type text. The username. Then we have page. Okay, yeah, sorry, it's a text and page. Suppose we have mobile number, sorry, import for mobile. Okay, so sorry, if I submit this data, this will be a form data. And if I submit this at JSON request, then it will be a JSON object. Okay, there is a difference between JSON object and form data. JSON object holds the JSON, form data holds the key value pairs, just a key value pairs. That's it. So we will get the response in the username, age, and mobile in the post object. But when we are dealing with the JSON object, it's just a simple string for the Django, right? So we have to pass it to the dictionary or list, then we have to process it. So before passing it, or let's say before submitting it, we have to define a key which will hold all this JSON object or JSON string. JSON actually a string. Okay, so this would be a tricky task to do in the backend. So that's why we have to use the serializer. It will take care of anything. Whatever we pass, it will convert it to the JSON understandable data types. That's it. Can we send image file using JSON format? No, Ashish, we cannot send the file, because what we will be write, let's say we have a profile picture. What we are going to write in the profile picture field. So we cannot send the image in the JSON, but we can send its attribute through the JSON, like what the image name is, where it is actually stored, or what was the height of that image. Or we can pass the attribute, but we cannot pass the entire image through the JSON object. We have to use the form object. Sorry, form data, not the object, form data. Okay, anyone have any doubt? You can ask me. I'm still here. You can ask me. Yeah, Rakesh. Okay, February batch. Do you have any questions? Okay, Ashish, bye. Okay, Ocean. Hello, February batch. The last week's assignment. Thank you, sir. Good night. Yeah, Abhishek, bye. Vivek, have you completed your last week's assignment? Yeah, forget about the last week's assignment. Okay, Suraj. Okay, you can share your link, GitHub link with me. Okay, instead of posting on the chat, you can WhatsApp me. Okay. Okay, then, guys, we'll meet tomorrow. Okay. Have a good night. Bye bye.